I still remember the anxiety of those early veterinary career days, second guessing myself, feeling like I had to have all the answers, and wondering if I was really cut out for this. If that feels familiar, you're not alone. Ready Vet Go is the mentorship program I wish I had. A 7-month journey with live mentorship, community, and real world skills to help you grow your confidence. It's perfect for early career vets and anyone making a transition into small animal practice, but anyone is welcome to join. New cohorts start in July and October, and you can get 10% off with the code SPRINKLE at readyvetgo.co. You don't have to figure it out alone.
Vet med draws a certain type of person. One of the types of people that it draws is people that have often been let down by humans, but were held up by animals. I do know what I'm doing. And I can do hard things, and I can do new things.
Welcome to Vet Life Reimagined. The nightmare we all fear starting our first week as a practicing veterinarian was Melanie Goble's reality. Her first few years in the field felt like a series of unfortunate events, veterinary edition. So how did someone who was struggling to find a good fit and feeling beaten down become a veterinarian who now thrives in remote locations as the only vet for miles? How did she go from surviving to mentoring early career vets in programs like Ready Vet Go, where mentors are required to must love vet med? You're about to find out. This episode touches on the hard moments, when the pressure is crushing, when compassion fatigue creeps in, and when one harsh voice drowns out 100 successes. Melanie's story is one of raw honesty, resilience, and rediscovered purpose. It's about being human in vet med, finding your footing when the ground keeps shifting, and learning how to show up imperfect but present for both animals and people. I hope this episode reminds you you are not alone. Melanie was also one of the original admins of Not One More Vet Facebook group, joining just 2 weeks after the group was formed in 2014. We talk about the early days of the movement, why it resonated so powerfully, and how NOMV has grown into a vital support system for the profession. A quick note before we begin, this episode includes open discussion of mental health and suicide. If these topics are sensitive for you, please take care while listening. Support resources are linked in the show notes. Also, if you like this episode, I recommend checking out the episodes with Taylor Miller and Brian Burquin, both whom were involved in NOMV and touch on topics like mentorship, perfectionism, and resiliency. Now, let's get to the conversation with Dr. Melanie Goble. When did you know you wanted to get into veterinary medicine?
Oh, that was back when I was 4. I had a woman from church, we called her Grandma Gherkin, and she rescued birds that had been injured and raised them. And I was like, that is the coolest thing. I want to be an animal doctor. I didn't know what a veterinarian was, but I knew I wanted to be one. Just kind of went from there. It's kind of my whole life purpose, I guess. I mean, I'm one of 5 kids, so we all are extremely different. And I'm the only one that wanted to go into any type of medicine. I don't know, we lived in the middle of nowhere. I just wanted to help all the animals no matter what happened. I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's fix that. And here I am.
One of 5 kids, that seems like a lot. So maybe you were outside a lot to maybe get a little peace and quiet too.
Yeah, I mean, I was a Gen X, so we weren't in the house anyway.
Okay.
But yeah, I would go outside and I'd take my book and then I'd go and I'd make a little bed of grass and just lay there reading, because if I was inside, then they wanted me to clean and everybody else wanted to do loud things. And I'm like, I don't want to do loud things. So, I read James Harriet, or I read, pretty much whatever came in front of me. And my punishment was always to take away books. I wasn't allowed to read when I got in trouble. So.
Sounds like you were definitely a learner. And you shared a story with me too. One of your earliest memories was a trip to the doctor. And
yes.
It sounded like you were getting maybe an echocardiogram or something.
Yeah.
And you had a question that was about maybe the restraints that they had put on you because you were so young, and your mom knew you were curious on a medical aspect of it. So do you mind sharing that
Right.
story a bit?
Yeah. So when I was born, I had a heart murmur, and they wanted to keep track of that because one of my aunts had recently been diagnosed in heart failure when I was born. So twice a year, I would go in and I'd have an echocardiogram. And when I was 4, it was Valentine's Day, just after my 4th birthday. And we went into the hospital and went into the room, and they put clamps over my wrists and ankles so that I wouldn't flail and all of that. And I asked my mom, I said, Mom, what are these called? And she's like, well, you'll have to ask the doctor when he comes back. And I looked at her and I'm like, but that's your responsibility. And she just looked at me like, what are you thinking? But yeah, that was one of my earliest memories. And I think the main reason was because they gave me 2 chocolate hearts wrapped in red foil. So I got treats and I didn't have to share.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
With 5 kids, I'm sure you can't remember everything. So
right?
I think that's really neat that you had such early memories of this. So when you were getting ready for vet school, did you have an idea of what being the animal doctor was going to look like? Did you know what species, or did that kind of change through vet school? What was your vet school experience?
Well, starting out beforehand, there was many times that I'm like, oh, I want to do ophthalmology because I had a dog that had a corneal ulcer and we don't know where it came from. Or I wanted to do behavior because I'm super interested in behavior. And other than going to the vet with my family, which wasn't even that often, I'm from one of those families where the animals maybe got vaccines, but not much else. And so I really didn't know what I was getting into. And even getting ready for vet school and undergrad, I was like, oh, yeah, I should probably look and see what I need to do in order to get into vet school. As I looked up the things and I started filling out application stuff, and I'm like, oh, I have to take the GRE. And I was like, oh, when can I do that? And I had 1 week before I had to take it and it was due to be in. So I was like, oh, guess I should do that. So I signed up to take it at a town about 2 hours away from where I went to undergrad, and then got waitlisted. So I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to do some small animal stuff. And then 2 weeks before school started, I was accepted. And they called me up and they're like, do you want in? And I'm like, well, yeah. But I have 2 weeks before school started. So I had to quit my job, pack up, go find an apartment in a university town where there was no housing. And I had no idea. I'm like, I just want to be a vet. Like that's all I knew. And then I got into vet school and I'm like, oh, I can't be a vet. I am like, I went from being the big fish in a small pond to like the minnow in the ocean. I'm like, I thought I was smart and now I'm the dumb kid. Like, I I found out during vet school I didn't know how to study. I had always been one of those people that if I listened to the teacher and I did my homework, I read the book, I did great. But I didn't know how to study. So I didn't know how to absorb all of this information. So there was multiple times I went down to her dean's office and I'm like, I'm done. I quit. I'm out of here. And she looked at me and she was like, Melanie, go back to class. I'd be like, okay. I'd go back to class. But I really had no idea what I wanted to do beyond being a vet. So I just kind of kept at it. And I didn't think that I had, well, I know I didn't have good enough grades to get like a competitive internship or anything like that. And I'm like, I just need money at this point. So I'm like, well, I'm going to go into GP. And I did. Well, sort of. My first job was actually in an ER. And I was left alone like my first weekend. That was crazy because it was 4th of July weekend in a tourist town in Maine. And it was my 4th shift. was Friday, a 4th of July weekend. And I was like, okay. And I was left alone. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but okay, I can do this. And that was actually the first time that I had a client tell me to kill myself. That I was not worth the air that I breathed, that I should never have been given a license. And my error that resulted in this was I didn't do a blood pressure before giving percortin to an Addisonian dog. And to this day, I'm still like, why did this person think we needed to do? And why were you traveling with your Addisonian dog without having a plan in place? But the owner was an orthopedic surgeon from upstate New York, and his dog was my least critical patient of the night. Like, I literally had animals in cages and tied to things because we ran out of cages. I had all of my exam rooms full. I had people waiting in the lobby when he was screaming at me. And people in the exam rooms were opening the door and looking out and what's going on? And I'm just like this deer in a headlight looking like, what is going on? I don't know how to handle this. And I gave him the dog. He left, whatever, just get out of here. And I went back into the treatment area and I broke down for 5 minutes. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I have to get back to work. Because it was me. I can't remember if I actually had a credentialed technician or if it was just an assistant. Not that it's just an assistant. Assistants are amazing, and a receptionist and me. And nobody was super experienced. And I pulled myself back together and I went back to work. And the nice thing was that the rest of that night, everybody that I talked to that was present when that happened, they just looked at me and they're like, you did not deserve that. He's a chick. And this kind of helped me get through the night. And that's when I realized I didn't really want to do emergency. I don't like the stress of it. And then that job didn't work out. It was a really poor fit altogether. And I moved back to Wisconsin and went into GP. And even that really wasn't a good fit for me. I loved doing it, but I just never felt like I belonged anywhere that I was working. So 9.5 years in, I got fired from a job. No reason, no cause given. I was just like, pack your stuff, you have 15 minutes, get out. And I was just shocked. So I took 3 days to figure out, what do I want to do with my life? What do I want to do when I grow up? And I kind of fell into doing relief work. And I love it. I guess I love that I'm always kind of in the honeymoon phase with a clinic. Everybody's happy. I haven't gotten sick of them. They haven't gotten sick of me. And when I leave, and then they're really excited when I come, and then I leave again, and it's wonderful. And now I'm taking a year to work at a clinic in Canada in hopes that I can expand my business to not only be working in the US, but also in Canada doing relief, because as crazy as vet med is in the US, there's not enough vets in Canada, anywhere. It's ridiculous. They're so underserved in so much of Canada. And I really love doing rural work. I get to do a lot of things that most people are like, what are you doing? You shouldn't be able to do that. Or I talk to a lot of specialists and I'm like, okay, what can I do? Because there's no specialist within 500 miles, or they need to take a plane or a boat to get to a specialist. What can you teach me to do so I can do a lot more than a lot of people feel comfortable doing?
That seems like such a long stretch from when you started talking about, starting on July 4th. I remember my internship right after vet school, and that is when we started too. Our first shifts were going to be July 4th weekend. And of course, it's a rotating internship. So who are the lucky interns that get the ER shifts day and night, right? And I was one of those. I can't remember if it was if was on day or night, but they did warn us. They're like, you are starting on the busiest weekend of the entire year when it comes to ER. If you can do this, and they did not leave us alone. But I do remember, like, it is ingrained in me, like they were warning us this is the busiest weekend. And so to be on your own, I'm just so glad that at least all the other pet parents realized that you did not deserve that and can support you through the rest of the night. But and then now it's like you're like, oh yeah, like give me the things I don't know how to do. I'm like, what can I do? What can I learn? So do you mind sharing a little bit? Like that's what I'm noticing in that story. Where was kind of the some confidence and where did some of this come from where you could kind of change to where you're like, yeah, like what are the things that I can learn how to do because they don't have another option and I'm excited to be able to give them that care that they need.
Oh, that's a hard thing to answer. Okay, so I graduated in 2005, and I would say in
Okay.
2013, I traveled, or 2014, sorry, I traveled to Mongolia with Christian Veterinary Missions. Okay, it was a long trip to get there. So I left my little town in Wisconsin, drove to Chicago. Well, had someone drive me to Chicago. Flew from Chicago to Seoul, South Korea to Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, which was like 24 hours or so in travel time. And I land in Mongolia and we're driving to the apartment that I'm staying at like 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm like super jet lagged. I don't know, it felt like 4 days after I left because there's time zone changes and all the thing. And like as we were driving into town, we saw this like horrible car accident. And I'm like, what is going on? And there are people driving all over the road. And I had no idea what was happening because it was just super weird. Like rules had no meaning at that point in my life, apparently. And they dropped me off. And then I had to be up and at the clinic at like 10 o'clock the next morning or that morning. And I go in, someone comes up and they're like, do you know how to do a cardiocentesis? And I'm like, sure.
Right.
And so I, it's what, 9 years out that I had been, and I still can't say that I was super confident, but I was there to train and mentor other veterinarians. So I'm like, let's get the book. And because I'm not always going to be here, you have to need to know where to look. So he'd pull out one of the textbooks, and it was an old textbook, but it hasn't changed much, And oh no, it was just thoracocentesis at this point. And we pull out the book and we go through it together. We read it. Like, do you understand what it's talking about? Because obviously English is not the first language for these Mongolian vets. And I spoke like 2 words of Mongolian, and even that was not very good. And so we go through it and we do this thoracocentesis blind on this little cat. Its name was Fluffy, whatever the Mongolian word for Fluffy was. Its name was Fluffy, but in Mongolian. And I was like, okay, we pull all this fluid off of this cat. And then like 4 hours later, someone mentioned that they have an ultrasound. And I'm like, well, that would have been helpful. So we pull the cat back out, we put on the ultrasound, and it had a horrible pericardial effusion. So I did my first pericardiocentesis since vet school, well jet lagged in a foreign country, surrounded by people that I had no idea who they were, but I was supposed to be training. And I was there for a month, and we didn't have access to blood work. We had a super old X-ray machine. We did have the ultrasound, but we didn't have a lot of the stuff that we rely on. We didn't have the bells and whistles, the things that we rely on in the United States and in Canada. And I was just like, how do I do this? Like, how am I supposed to train these people to do the stuff that we do back in home? And that's when I really had to lean into that idea that our history and physical exam is the most important part of what we do. And 99% of the time, I'll just have the history of what's coming in. And we play this game at a lot of my clinics where I'm like, we read this stuff and I'm like, okay, this is what I think is going on before the patient gets there. And then everybody else says, oh, this is what they think. This is what and then we, it's basically a little fun contest game thing to find out, like, what do you know? And I think that experience in Mongolia was one of the things that taught me I do know what I'm doing. And I can do hard things and I can do new things. And I just have to focus on those basics. So I think that is what makes me excited to do more.
I think that's a perfect answer. It makes complete sense. So before I go on to some of the other things you're involved in right now, I also can't help thinking you're traveling all over. Like you're in Newfoundland for a year now. You're talking about in Mongolia for a year, and because of our introduction,
just for a month, not for a year.
Oh, just a minute. Sorry. You were married. I know you married in vet school because you said he proposed the first year, and you're like, not the best timing.
Yeah. Christmas morning of first year.
So after, of course, you made him plan the wedding and everything. So you have a significant other. Does he go with you? How does that work with you traveling so much? I'm just curious.
Well, that's changed over time. So when I first started doing relief and I started my relief business in 2014, he went with me when I went down to the Virgin Islands. So I did a month each time for like 5 months down in the Virgin Islands through 2014 and 2015. So he came for those. I've done a couple different stints of a couple of weeks to a month in Alaska, and he went to some of those. Most of the time until 2020, most of the time I went by myself. He only went if we were going somewhere cool. So that was fun. So I think at one point, it was 1 year, I think, as I was counting up stuff for taxes, I was away from home 240 some days per year.
Wow.
So needless to say, absence makes the heart go fonder is a thing at times. And then there's times when you're just like, wow, I really miss you. And there's times like, oh, okay, well, now we're traveling and we're with each other all the time. That can be more stressful. But he did move with me when I moved to Canada. But our big change was in 2020 when COVID hit. March of 2020, I had a client spit in my face while he was talking. And then he refused treatment for his pet and said, I have an upper respiratory infection and a fever. Now you're all infected. And he left. And that was the week before those actions were considered an act of terrorism. So like nobody cared. And I got sick 2 days later and ended up being in isolation for 36 days because I was sick that entire time. Not sick enough to go to the hospital, not sick enough to get a diagnosis, but sick enough that I didn't want to expose anybody because we had no idea. Like we knew so little at the time. So trying to go 72 hours without a fever, without medication. So we were separated for that time, even when I was at home, because we were isolating in our apartment. And then once I started working again, I switched my business model from kind of working at anywhere from 3 to 7 clinics a week because, I did stupid things like working 8 shifts in a week. Like, who does that? That was dumb. Uh, and I changed it to doing mainly like maternity leaves or like longer term things because I didn't want to be someone going between clinics and spreading disease potentially. So when we started doing that, he started going with me. So he'd go with me for 1 month, 2 month, 3 month stints wherever I was working. So that's how that changed. And when I started coming to Canada, he didn't come with me the first 2 or 3 times I came up, and then he came up for the 2 to 3 month stint so we could see if he liked Canada. And then I came up another time without him, and then we came up permanently. So yes, he traveled with me and without me. Or I traveled without him, both.
Through all of this too, like you have your personal business doing relief work. And I know you've been now involved with a couple of different things. I think Mongolia was one of those that you found out how much you enjoyed teaching. And so how did you get involved with like Not One More Vet and then in some of this mentorship capacity, like with Ready Vet Go?
So Not One More Vet, Nicole MacArthur started the Facebook group Not One More Vet in 2014. And I actually was invited to join by a colleague 2 weeks after it started. And that was also right around the time that I got fired from that job before starting relief. So I was not in a great place mentally when I was invited to join the group. And I was active and engaged in the group. And then in 2016, someone had made a comment about they needed help with membership. And so I was like, hey, I'd be happy to help with that. Because, I'm good at doing stuff in the background. Like, I didn't want to be the person that was like, hey, stop being mean, be nice, or we have to take down your comment or your post or whatever. I'll just verify that people are vets and let them into the group. So they said, sure, come on in, start doing that. And I was included in the chat where the admins and mods would talk about what's going on and do we have to do stuff. And I'd randomly pipe up now and then and say something. But by and large, I spent a lot of time vetting vets. And at one point, I was adding between 1,000 and 2,000 vets per week, like verifying that they graduated from vet school, that where they were licensed, like all that kind of stuff. Because it was needed. Like, so many people were like, I need support. Maybe not all as overt as my first weekend with that client, but we've all had bad interactions with clients. We've all had cases go bad. We've all had really great things happen too. We're just like, oh my goodness, I want to tell you about this, but most people don't get how cool that was, So having somewhere to talk about the highs and the lows of that med was just really important. And then as I was doing that, they're like, hey, we really appreciate all that you're doing. We'd like you to be a full admin and help with running things. And I'm like, fine, I guess. But this is going to be my thing. It's still this mentorship that I'll help out our team. And then we started to realize how much people needed additional support. And we started Not One More Vet Inc., the nonprofit arm of things, in order to provide financial support to people that needed it. So the first grant that we gave out was actually for a veterinarian to pay for a relief vet to come in so that she could actually get mental health care. And it's changed now. That's not how we do it, but that was the very first one that we gave out. And that was pretty amazing. And so we started Not One More Vet Inc. And just grew and grew and grew. And when 2020 hit, we needed more help. So we hired our executive director, and then we hired additional staff. I ended up having to leave the board at the end of 2021 because I'd had a number of health issues come up and I needed to back off. And now it's so big. There's a new executive director. There's, I think, like 7 or 8 additional staff people. Like, there was just 5 volunteers. We started. And it's crazy how big it's grown and how much they do now. Now there's the Not One Low Vet group, there's the technician, there's the student group. They still have the grants program. They have a cyberbullying task force. They're in the middle of Race Around the World right now, which is the biggest fundraiser. And there's their Blueprint, which is a certification that clinics can get to show that you're actually walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And that's a living certification, so you can have it taken away. And there's always room to grow. So it's not saying, oh, here you are, you've gotten it, you're done, you don't need to do more. But it says, hey, you're on the way, you're doing it. And that's going to change with time. And yes, it's going to change, but you can do this and we're here to support you. So there's lots of stuff like that. And that's how I got into there. And then Ready, Vet, Go. I think Danny had posted in one of the Facebook groups saying, hey, if anyone's interested in mentoring, here we go. And I had mentored a few other people, it just kind of happened over the years. And I was really excited to be able to do this. And Danny said, yeah, come on in. And here we are. So I don't know, like my life it's really weird. I'm like, I want to do this. And I have had so much luck and privilege to be able to just kind of fall into the things that I do. Like, I don't actually know half the time how it happened, but I always end up where I need to be. And that's pretty exciting.
Well, it sounds like you're present. You have to be present. You have to be doing something for that luck to find you. You were talking about adding 1,000 to 2,000 people a week. How are they getting the word out that they existed, for starters? And what do you think is it about NOMV that they're doing so well that they continue to grow, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think it's multifold. So as far as people finding out about it, I think people were excited to just have some place to go and talk that didn't cost anything to join. So, I mean, Facebook was popular. It's not as popular with the young folks these days. Like we still have a lot of people coming in, like new grads and all that still coming in. But there really wasn't anything like it. And so it was meeting a need where people were at the time. So I think that's why. And we had, at that point in time, like people would be like, hey, I'm adding all of my classmates. So one person would add 80 people. And that also plays into how it's been successful, is that this was very grassroots. It was started as a reaction to the suicide death of Sophia Yin, which really hit for that population really hard, because she was such a happy and amazing woman. And if it could happen to her, like it could happen to anybody, you know? And vet med draws a certain type of person. And one of the types of people that it draws is people that have often been let down by humans, but were held up by animals. So there's a lot of grief and trauma from life. And to be able to come together with other people that have experienced the same things that nobody else understands is huge. Human doctors don't treat you from cradle to grave and after. Like, that we are there through the entire life. We do euthanize our pets and our clients' pets. Most of us also don't separate ourselves. Like, yes, we compartmentalize, but we are intertwined with our patients and with our clients. Like, even when we try not to be, we are, because almost every vet that I know has had someone come into the exam room and just like word vomit their entire life to them. And you're just like, oh, okay. So gout needs vaccines? You're just like, okay. There's a lot of secondary trauma that comes from other people. And there's also the joys when people are like, oh, this wonderful thing happened and we want to include you. Getting a puppy or a kitten or adopting that old dog or that middle-aged cat or that horse or, having that, 4-H pig that you just absolutely love, whatever it is, we're entwined with the daily lives of people. And there's not a lot of professions that have that. And even though we're here for the animals, we end up being there for the people too. And it's nice to have people that can understand that.
That's really, really well said. And I'm thinking back by the dates you were giving. And when NOMV started, that was not exactly the heightened time where we were talking a lot about mental health and well-being, if I remember correctly. So
Right.
how have you kind of seen that conversation evolve over time?
Well, I would say that in that 2014 range, we were honestly just really starting to have people talk about mental health at all, like in or out of vet med. Now, for vet med specifically, the CDC had been researching why veterinarians has this elevated rate of suicide since the 40s. So long before social media. And when people are like, oh, James Herriot. Well, James Herriot is the pen name of Alfred White, who took time off from vet med because of his mental health to write the books. Most people don't realize that. And the books that he wrote, they were the real stories. And some of his colleagues had died by suicide as well. Those parts aren't in the book. Somebody made a t-shirt that said James Herriot lied. Because it made it sound like it was all so wonderful. But after you're in vet med and you go back and read the books, you're like, oh, he did tell us. We just missed it. And I think because NOMV grew so quickly and because we started to talk to the people that were actually doing those studies that were being done and the studies that have been published since, we made a point of trying to discuss suicide and mental health issues appropriately, or at least trying to. I wish we all did it right all the time, but we don't. But I think that's a big draw as to why NOMV has done well. And then once again, being grassroots, that we brought it up. We had the death of Sophia Yin. And yes, we talk about her, but we talk more about the side effects. Like, what did that cause to have happen within vet med? Like, how did that change us? How can we use this great tragedy to help us all learn better resilience. And then how can we actually change the parts of vet med that make this an issue? And so we started talking about those things. And then because we were having success, other people said, oh, we want to get in on this. And there's some other organizations that have started or that have tried to create their own thing. And yes, they have them, but they never played out the same. And I suspect, I don't know for sure, but I think some of it goes to the fact that we were coming at it from we are in this and we are wanting to change things for each of us, but we're starting with changing ourselves. I will never say that I'm the most stable person. And, I still struggle. I mean, the first time that I considered suicide was in 4th grade. And so being able to share those stories and not just it in the darkness and the shame of it, but rather say, I made it through. I'm an example of how you can make this through. And yeah, I'm not going to be perfect. And I'm going to have little jagged edges and I'm going to have dark humor, but I lived and so can you. And I will sit with you and I will stand with you and I will fight with you and I will cry with you. No matter what happened, you are not alone. And Jason, who is one of our co-founders of NOMV, and he created the little saying of, we are not alone, we are all one. And when you know you're not alone, gives you that connection that keeps you tethered to life. So that's why I think it's gone.
Wow. And, back to what we were talking about with Ready, Vet, Go, you're mentoring usually early career veterinarians that I know Danny, who's the founder of Ready, Vet, Go, she talked about the questions that people tended to have were not the clinical questions necessarily. They were like the life questions or the communication questions, or so making this a broad question, what is something that maybe we haven't yet talked about that you feel is something that you constantly are sharing when it comes to early career veterinarians that you think best supports them as human beings in this very unique role of veterinary medicine?
I would say what I often tell people and what I wish more people knew is one of the most important things to be ready and able to say in the manner that is true to yourself is, I don't know the answer to that question, but I know who to ask and I'm going to do some research and get back to you. And when you can say that to a client with confidence, you're set. Because that phrasing, for one, it shows that you're human. 2, it shows that you're humble enough to not believe you know everything. 3, you have connections to figuring out the answers. And 4, you care enough to go that extra step. And so if you can say, I don't know, but I'm going to find out, the clients are going to be so thankful. And you're going to have that opportunity to come back and say, you know what? I found out what needs to happen. I'm not the person that's able to do this for you, but here's where you can go. This is what you can do. Or these are your options. You're going to help more people. You're going to help more animals. And at the end of the day, most of the time, clients are going to be more accepting if you don't have that answer and can't fix them. And if it doesn't, whatever it is, doesn't work out, you've already shown that you're human and that you care. So they're going to be a little bit more of understanding when and if something goes bad, because something will go bad at some point, but they already know that you care. So, I mean, we beat ourselves up enough that we don't need clients to be all up on us as well. And sometimes they will, but when you've done everything you can, then learning to let go of the bad things is essential.
Well, I want to thank you so much because I think, like you said, we are very critical of ourselves. There will be that handful of clients that are even more critical and do not help us. And it is when we can, as the community of veterinary medicine, come together and support each other, be vulnerable, share. That's the magic. It really is.
Right.
That's the word that comes to my mind is that's the warm fuzzies that gets us through the day. That is where people understand and we can share the good things that nobody understands how good, and also be in the comfort of others who also understand when the bad things happen. And you're there, you're part of that. And I just want to thank you so much. Is there any that you want to share in addition before I ask the final question?
The one other thing that I want the veterinary community to remember, and this is not just veterinarians, but also technicians and assistants and CSRs, is that when something goes wrong, and want you to think of the last 100 times you've done that thing, whether it's answering the phone, giving an injection, placing an IV, doing a surgery, whatever it is. Think of the last 100 times. And if this one thing that's gone wrong, if that's the only one thing that's gone wrong those last 100 times, you still have a 99% success rate. And we should not let that 1% ruin the joy of the 99.
Very well said. And when you are in that moment of the 1%, again, come find the other people who can remind you of the 99% because they've all been there too.
And it is okay to sit in the suck of that 1%.
Yeah.
Like, sit there when it happens. Those feelings are valid, but they do not define who you are. That 1% does not define you.
Very key point. Yeah. Thank you again. I always love to end on a gratitude. So it doesn't have to be career related, but what is something that comes to mind when I say, what is something you're very grateful for right now?
I am grateful for a lot of things. I'm trying to think of what's the best one. I am thankful that I have been allowed to be a part of so many different people's lives in different ways, that I can just make little ripples. But I might only be there for just a minuscule moment. And I'm hopeful that most of those times, those moments are good. And even in the moments that are really, really hard, that I can be there for the people that are struggling in that moment so that they don't have to be alone. And I'm so thankful that I can be a part of that for people and with people.
Well, goodness, this has been so good. I just wanted to say that it can be hard to know what to say sometimes in those hard moments for people. And I want to point out what you said. Sometimes you don't need to say anything. Just sit there because you just want to be alone. And you don't have to say anything. It's just being there.
Right. That I've been going through the process of becoming an educator. There's different institutes for something called ECPR, which is emotional CPR. And it basically is training people to just be present, to not have to fix, and to just be. I recommend that everybody do this training. It's like a 12-hour thing, but it changed the way I interacted even with clients. Because as a doctor, we go in and we're like, yeah, we have to be the fixer. We have to do this. But when I go in, I initially go in with this concept of ECPR where I'm going in just to listen and to be present for them before I go into doctor mode. So I can actually get to the true root of the problem. Because when somebody comes in with a pet with XYZ problem or issue, a lot of times that's not actually why they're there. And to actually sit down and listen to them and find out, okay, where are they coming from? And yeah, I might think that they have to do XYZ thing, but if you're actually listening to them, that thing's not a possibility. So when we're talking about spectrum of care, sometimes I flat out ask, what are your intentions for today? Are you looking to diagnose and treat? Or are you looking for someone to tell you it's okay to say good? And I mean, that's the fixing part, but it comes from, like, before that, I'm actually listening to the people and hearing them say, oh, XYZ happened with the dog, and, like, my dad's in the hospital, and I'm caring for my mom in the meantime, and my kid is nonverbal autistic, and our house just burned down, and we're living in a rental unit with only one bedroom, and there's 7 of us, and, whatever. I mean, it feels like that's what everybody tells us all the time. And if you're actually reading between the lines and listening and feeling what they're feeling, and and feel this heavy weight, and when you're able to look at them and say, as you say that, then my heart just constricts, and I just feel like I'm under just boulders on my shoulders. Like, I feel how heavy all of this is for you. And I'm just here to sit with you under those boulders until you have the strength to move. And the people are just like, well, keep listening. Because most people feel so invisible when they're going through that. And, it doesn't always have to be that dramatic. It might just be, my hair did not come out right, and then I blew a tire on the way here, and I chipped my nail. Like, it can be little tiny things, but they build up to just a lot. And you're just like, I can't do it anymore. And sometimes you just need someone to listen.
I hope you enjoyed this fascinating veterinary story. We can make an impact in so many places. Check out the show notes for lots of resources. Please make sure you are subscribed on your podcast app, subscribe on the YouTube channel, and follow me on LinkedIn, where I hang out the most. You can contact me on LinkedIn, on the website at vetlifereimagined.com, and to send me a text message, find the link at the top of the show notes below that says, send us a text message. I want to thank our longtime sponsors, Fire Consulting and Will Hughes, who support the podcast over on our hosting platform, Buzzsprout. You can support the podcast too. Just check out the show notes for a link. And I hope to see you next time on Vet Life Reimagined.